Warm welcome to our dear viewers. You're watching VNTV Ivanatura, and in our series Mas Hangseratet Tarsalgas, I'm delighted to welcome Zoltán Tóth and Richard Németh to the studio. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Our dear viewers are already familiar with Zoli. He's involved in so many things, especially since he became deeply engrossed in subconscious research and striving to understand its logic. And when he came to this understanding, he realized that he could provide assistance with numerous matters, indeed, with so much. He can even help with things that many people have written off, saying, well, that's just how it is. A significant number of individuals are uncertain about how to handle it. And autism has always been, and perhaps still remains, a matter close to your heart and a favorite subject. And Rixie, I don't know, can I call you that?
Of course.
You two had a very fortunate encounter because Rixie somehow recognized the potential in Zoli. Zoli saw the potential in Rixie, and you achieved very beautiful results together. And you've come here today, and Rixie was kind enough to promise us that he would share some of his thoughts and experiences with our viewers regarding his personal state and improvements, which I believe is a very exciting and fascinating topic and can offer a lot of hope to all those who struggle with similar difficulties in a similar fashion, so to speak. I would describe it as living life on a challenging path. Live their lives. And many people don't even fully realize that in some cases even the most basic things might be 100 times harder for you. This is because you execute them just as beautifully and flawlessly, and they don't pick up on how much more you're struggling compared to others, for instance. And first, Zoli, I'd like to ask you about your attention to autism. Let's recall your interest in it for a moment, even though we've discussed it in earlier episodes. But let's bring up, here and now, what exactly about it so deeply captivated you?
Nothing. Honestly. So basically, if you had asked me about autism in 2013, I would have asked back, okay, so where are we going to party now, or what's the plan? Because I don't get what you're saying. So, personally, I truly had absolutely no idea about autism at all. I was simply living my life quite happily, to be honest. So, I organized major breakdance competitions. I really loved living my life to the fullest and had a blast, but I constantly found that my personal relationships always led to a breakdown. And then came a point when I literally wanted to kill myself. Now that was a turning point that I had to understand something. Until then, I didn't deal with things like that. Me, what do I need to understand? I know everything. You know, I'm the man. I know it all. And, well, looking back on it now, I would have definitely received an ADHD diagnosis. I was completely hyperactive. In spite of everything, I truly believed I had things figured out, but my romantic relationships consistently disintegrated. Then, with my last one, I realized there's something within me, because the same pattern kept repeating, just with different individuals. So, there's a definite snag in my makeup. Yet, I can't unravel it. I don't comprehend what it is. I slipped into a depression and went to the Rakoshaba train station, hoping for something to happen, but the train didn't come. That turned out to be a pivotal moment for me, sparking my intense curiosity. So, if I'm not going to off myself, I was curious about what's going on inside that's doing this to me in such a way that I can't do anything to prevent it. So, I decided to go to the bottom of it because I felt that I had to hit rock bottom. Now, since I'm not afraid and I'd end my life anyway, what's there to fear? Let's go to the very bottom. Well, I did. So we figured out what a trauma center is. I uncovered the subconscious logic and even protected the methodology, but essentially, when I improved, others noticed it on me. They asked me how I did this, what was happening to me. I replied that I didn't know myself, but we would definitely do something about it. So I figured something out, and then they asked me for help because they wanted to improve themselves as well, and wanted me to assist them. And so, a type of training program began to develop, and then I initially introduced it into the entrepreneurial sphere. So I attended business breakfast with this, where I spoke about the logic of the subconscious, and his mother, Cecilia Kaut, was present. Afterwards we conversed, and she expressed that she completely grasped my message and inquired if it might be effective for her child. I replied that trauma is trauma, at most it's just more significant. Because she recounted his symptoms to me, I responded, it's akin to what people experience, only more severe, so I figured in theory it ought to work, it just might require more time. That was my approach, and so we attempted it through a process of elimination since Cecilia had already tried absolutely everything, and still there was no change. Anyway, I also brought the documentation with me to show that here it is. In 2008, one of his diagnoses was childhood autism. This diagnosis remained unchanged even by 2011. In 2015, he still had a diagnosis of mild intellectual disability, and then in February 2017, that was taken away from him. So here you can see the whole progression, how he changed, and 2000. When did I start training him?
In April or May of 2015.
Yes, so in 75 instances we were able to achieve a result where, with a bit of time, the code was removed from him. For this to happen, he was needed, his mother was needed, and the method was needed. So together we created, it sounds funny, but we created a product. However, it truly is the case, so he virtually became an example for others. It's an example, you know, like with athletes, when one person breaks a world record and then all of a sudden everyone else starts accomplishing the same feat. I'm confident that this is what will happen now, because here is a living example. I've actually searched international sites and I can't find an example like this, which I'm hopeful about. I actually have other references besides him, but Rixie truly stands out as the best example because he became a pedagogical assistant, is in a relationship, lives independently, enjoys dancing, making music, kayaking, and many other activities. So I believe that he has completely exhausted all facets of independence.
Rixie, please tell us a little about yourself. How? It started with childhood autism, right? I assume that's the oldest document. But what specific symptoms did you experience that necessitated separate and focused attention? What was it that made you different from the average? Tell us a little about yourself, okay? How did you, deep down inside, experience all of that? Did you notice anything unusual yourself, or did you only realize later that your mom was concerned and attempting to resolve some issues related to you?
As a child, what I really noticed about myself was that I didn't dare to open up to others, that outside of my family, I trusted almost no one. I didn't dare to socialize with anyone, and as I mentioned earlier, I was afraid to open up to other people. The primary reason for this was fear. Because I used to think everyone and everything wanted to harm me. And every other thing that happened that wasn't my fault, I took very personally. So I took the blame for things that weren't my fault, just as I mentioned earlier. And because of that, I was even afraid to exist in a romantic relationship. But thanks to him, during the training, I got out of that funk.
Let me ask about your daily life, Rixie. You managed school, right? You had to go into a community day after day, where you could actually go through your entire schooling like that, without having any friends or anything. I assume you were a very good student, because after all... In addition, if we specifically focus on the strengths of autism or ADHD, these conditions are associated with tremendous strengths, excellent abilities, and very positive characteristics. What would you say about yourself? What were your strong suits?
For instance, what I truly enjoyed was mathematics. I was quite proficient in math at that time, although there are parts of it that I'm not really good at. Another thing I truly enjoyed was drawing, technical education, or physical education. So I really loved those. And it was in 5th grade when I began studying history, which I still love to this day. And what I also really love to do is piano playing, or the drums.
If you were so timid, how did you permit that to happen? What do you suppose was Zoli's secret? How did you permit him to gaze so profoundly into your very being? Inside you? How did he manage that? Did you see this guy? What did you think of him? Perhaps you also believed he couldn't possibly uncover anything about you, since you have no secrets, as they are precisely and effectively concealed. These things truly must be brought to light, really excavated. You have to dig deep into the rabbit hole. And Zoli, in one of the episodes, explained his method. It's about training, you see. It's not about uncovering some past trauma that... You reacted with a loss of trust, as it were, believing that life is a truly unfair, significant jerk, capable of imposing numerous injustices upon you, and as a result, you both despise it and are furious with it while also being afraid of it. And what usually happens in psychological treatments is that we uncover these traumas, then we show empathy to and comfort the traumatized tiny self. We accept and comfort that little wounded inner child. However, Zoltán employs a distinct methodology in his work. He encourages you, says that you are capable of enduring this, you are capable of getting through it, you are capable of overcoming it, but what was going on inside you? Do you still recall from your very first meeting with Zoltán whether you found him likable or not? And so what was his secret that he opened you up like that?
Do you really remember?
I don't really remember it. However, I distinctly recall that subsequent to each and every training session, I experienced a profound sense that the world was unfolding right before my very eyes. I was encountering new things and having experiences that I honestly don't believe I had ever truly encountered or had the opportunity to witness previously. And that I started to develop trust in others, just as I had placed my trust in Zoltán. And thanks to that, I've reached this point in my life where, as Zoltán mentioned earlier, I'm in a relationship and I'm also working as a pedagogical assistant. And I genuinely feel that I am currently, now I'm really living like a normal person.
Do you often encounter individuals who share similar traits to yours? Because as a pedagogical assistant, you specialize in this field. You'll need to confidently stand before individuals, and I'd imagine you'll have to demonstrate a certain level of presence and expertise. This is crucial for them to place their trust in you as well. The very first step, step 0, is trust, isn't it? So that the subconscious mind also feels secure enough to truly open itself up and permit a kind of insight. What are your thoughts on your fellow individuals, Rixie?
You know, actually, I now work in a school in the autism department, where I really encounter children who have been diagnosed with the very same condition as I have. They're genuinely afraid, apprehensive about trusting others, and they become angry at even the smallest problem, living in constant fear. And what I really want to impress upon them, first and foremost, is that there is absolutely no need to be afraid, and that they should indeed be brave enough to open up to other people, because they are truly not alone.
But the true essence of human nature is quite frightening, wouldn't you say? So I also often find myself contemplating the idea that it is perfectly normal for us to fear the wolf. We are aware that one should not provoke or interfere with a bear, so they are, after all, stronger and also predators and so on. But I truly believe that sometimes people genuinely earn the right to be feared, and that we absolutely should be afraid of them. For one thing, because of their unpredictable reactions, which are beyond their control, and even unpredictable to themselves. Which is quite an interesting point, because that's what makes this entire human game on Earth so grand, the fact that we never know how anyone will respond. But I believe the fear was justified. How did your family life change? So when you changed a bit, did it become easier for your mother? Was it difficult for your mother to deal with you?
I do recall that it wasn't easy to deal with me because, essentially, as I mentioned earlier, I was afraid to trust anyone apart from my family. I never formed friendships with others. Yes, I was afraid of people. And because of all that, my mother truly had a difficult life.
Did she need to spend a lot of time with you or always be around? What was the hardest part?
I think it was mostly that she was absent, so it was her absence, really.
You truly needed her love, that blanket of affection. Her presence.
Yes, I really needed her to be close. And that's precisely why I encountered a lot of difficulties and troubles.
And is your girlfriend capable of adequately filling that void for you at this time? That's good. I have one question, since the most exciting part of this whole thing is figuring out what the root cause might have been, and I want to ask both of you about that, taking into account confidentiality and so on. Is this a very sensitive topic if we talk a little about whether there's a specific reason at all for someone to become this way, or are they perhaps born with a distinct purpose, meant to teach us something significant?
From my perspective, what I can convey to you, which has emerged from many, examples is that this is an inherited trauma. It's an ancient major conflict where the child always suffers the consequences. A child is born with this predisposition, you see. Well, Rixie had such a predisposition that he didn't tell you everything, but when he first saw me, his eyes practically bugged out of his head. He was echolalic, thus I didn't even know what was up with him. I inquired, not knowing what echolalia meant, and since it was my first visit, I asked his mother, "What is this?" She stated, "He's echolalic." I questioned, "What's he blabbering about?" She answered, "The little mole," his then favorite. He was completely engrossed.
That you feel safe, as if you were projecting a show exclusively for yourself, focusing solely on that, and completely shutting out the rest of the world.
Yes, that was my way of calming myself.
It was your refuge.
Incidentally, we actually ended up naming the underlying cause of autism the Tagetus effect. Right, because it's strikingly similar to how, if a stranger comes, the child gets scared that the stranger will convince the parents to do something against them. And the child is constantly on guard. He had an ancient loss of trust, so he trusted no one. Not even me, you see, so he didn't trust me. It wasn't like he accepted me from the start. I put him through a training process, and at the end he realized there was nothing to it. So I literally had to nudge him past his reactive tendencies to get him to, shall we say, come back to himself. And what he said was that he came to his senses at the end of every training session. And you see, it's just like a puzzle. With each training session, a piece or two falls into place. Once enough pieces are assembled, his own complete picture begins to form, and from that moment, he can be considered independent. That's what I did with him. And once he came to his senses, he was able to tell a lot, both afterwards and while it was happening. In fact, he can talk about the cause. That is, what the child experiences as the cause. So really, the parents are not the cause of this. This is important. This is good news for parents, so don't blame yourselves. But parents are shaped, and things happen as they do, because unfortunately, this code is in the DNA. So they are also carried along by the current, like marionettes. But Rixie, you experienced something. Can you tell us about that? Do you recall what your parents brought out in you, or what was triggered in that situation?
Yes, I can.
You got really scared.
So what truly frightened me when I was a child was... What affected me very deeply was my parents' divorce, and their fighting. Because if, for instance, I witnessed my mother or father becoming upset, I interpreted it personally. At that time, I didn't perceive matters with the understanding I possess today. Instead, I genuinely felt that these occurrences were my fault, that their arguments and subsequent divorce were directly attributable to me. However, if we actually examined the reality of the situation, that was not the cause. The arguments and then the divorce stemmed from fundamental issues.
Did you feel like your life was in danger because if one of your parents isn't whole, meaning not fully present, not happy, not joyful? Was that a life-threatening fear for you? Or perhaps you believe it was? Or perhaps you aim to validate yourself and alleviate your sense of guilt, to demonstrate your significance that you're capable of assisting them, or perhaps even to show that you're a good child?
I remember that. Well, actually, it was a combination of both reasons. So, for instance, one time I witnessed my parents arguing, and I distinctly recall yelling at them to stop because I harbored a deep fear that they were going to get divorced, and when I realized it truly wasn't effective, and I witnessed my mother leaving to cry, that's when I too started feeling guilty myself. Because I truly saw it as them arguing because of me, and that they would divorce because of me, even though it wasn't my fault at all. Yes, because back then, I didn't interpret things in that particular manner. Because if we are genuinely examining autism then the child is actually doing all of this because they feel secure within the world they've constructed for themselves. Consequently, they personalize everything they encounter and take it to heart. So he doesn't understand what's going on, but perceives it as if it happened because of him. Or, I don't know, for example, let's say there's an autistic child in 2nd grade and a classmate tries to make jokes with him. And the other person will react similarly. So if we view the situation from the perspective of an autistic child, they'll interpret it as someone wanting to hurt them. However, the underlying cause for this reaction is the fear and uncertainty residing within them. And because of that, his subconscious defense mechanism activates, signaling to him that he cannot simply let it go and must protect himself. However, if we consider it from the other point of view, then the child who is attempting to joke with him is actually doing so because he actually just wants to be playful with him, but perhaps the autistic child doesn't grasp what the other kid is saying or doesn't comprehend its meaning, or it could simply be that the kid is bored and therefore desires to attract attention to himself.
How do you feel, Rixie? Are you happy about this change? That's a tough question. Does it bring you happiness that your life has changed so much? Or do you sometimes feel a longing to return to that familiar small inner world that you once inhabited?
No, I don't want to go back. Not at all, and I am truly happy about this transformation.
It's truly wonderful to witness how much you've blossomed, by the way. Zola, you mentioned something quite significant, that this was, let's call it, the very root cause of everything. The original cause that the child always suffers, and in a way, that's how it is. So, ever since humanity has been perpetuating itself by having offspring, a very significant portion of this involves parents influencing their children through upbringing, setting examples, and various other ways. Through inherited traits, and through what they've acquired, these pass on to their children. And I believe this is a truly challenging task for children, particularly when they face a negative role model, a lack of affection in their surroundings, or are compelled to mature within an environment that isn't conducive to life. And it's something that educators observe quite well too. So, truly, as long as a child is an innocent little one, the parental behavior is reflected in them, which they pass on and demonstrate. But I suppose with Rixie, that wasn't the situation this time. Well, there might have been arguments, but that's just a natural part of life, isn't it? But, do you consider it possible that as Rixie gets closer to becoming an adult, you're not an adult yet, right?
I am.
You're an adult. That, when childhood ends and he can be an adult, a fully fledged person, he can actually get rid of this burden. This is linked to childhood. The child always suffers. But when his status, his classification is already adult, then he's sort of freed from this. Now let's talk about this a little, okay? Just because I think this is something you can feel. This idea that the child always gets the short end of the stick, I think that's a universal law that truly affects everyone.
This has to change, and I'm glad. I'm so happy for autistic individuals now because I understand. I wasn't before wondering, oh my god, what's next? But now that I get it, I'm happy, because it puts the world in such a checkmate that there's no other way but to fix these things. So, first and foremost, for someone to have a child merely for the sake of obtaining a loan, I apologize for that. Or for someone to have a child just to have a home to escape to, and I could go on. Or for them to simply want to prove something. That's just absolute nonsense.
I'll give birth to someone for myself who is sure to love me.
Yes, this is about lack. We don't have children from lack. Getting back to it, if a person with autism grows up, that won't change. You can't outgrow it. The reason for that is very simple. If they reach adulthood, then the thought kicks in that they are the ones who have to raise a child. But if they are aware of how terrible it was for them, they won't want to experience it, worried they might hurt their child, and it'll be even worse as they get older. They become even more blocked off. Basically, people with autism are afraid of making mistakes because if you think about those old stories, if a child wasn't right, they were cast out. This occurred in countless tales, which meant the children were always the ones to bear the brunt of it. Well, it didn't come together, it wasn't conceived correctly, I don't know, they were judged and so on. The children were always rejected, and what could they possibly do about that? Who really asked to be born? They certainly didn't. And then they are born, with all the excitement of a new baby, and then the tables turn. It's the biggest disappointment in the world. The world's greatest drama, a child is awaited, then discarded. So, there's no greater trauma than this, and autism is basically pushing back against it, saying, hello, you need to grow in this can't happen, this has to stop. And precisely this is the matter, that they are fearful of committing the same errors themselves, and for that reason, they opt not to have children. This specific behavioral approach essentially functions as a continuous state of preparedness or alert mode. This is because they effectively keep themselves confined to a world where these things simply cannot come to exist. In other words, they're afraid of making a mistake, they're afraid of responsibility, and everything that reminds them of it. So they're also afraid of the good, because the good will eventually turn bad. So they prevent it from turning and breaking by not even wanting anything good. So this is a disorder.
To make them change.
And to them, a disorderly world is a secure one, because you see people are constantly paying attention to them. They do receive the assistance they require, yet they don't have to shoulder any responsibility. So they skillfully arrange their surroundings into a situation that aligns with their own perception of reality.
Tell me about how you wake up these days. I imagine you wake up in a better mood. The world has become more exciting. I assume you're in love, you're doing well, you're studying, educating yourself. A new chapter has opened up for you, one where you can now give back all the care and attention you once received, so to speak, and pass it on to others who will now trust you and rely on you as well. How do you truly feel about yourself now, in this very moment? Are you genuinely proud of yourself? Do you deeply love yourself? If you could elaborate a little more about this significant aspect, because I strongly assume that when someone lives in a state of great and overwhelming fear, they might not even get to the crucial point where the thought arises of how they truly feel about themselves at all. But now, you can clearly see and appreciate how much positive and encouraging feedback you're consistently getting from your immediate surroundings. Do you feel worthy of life now? Is it truly and genuinely important to you now to be, so to speak, a more openly engaged participant and a significant contributor to various things in this world?
Yes, so now I completely and wholeheartedly accept myself for who I am, recognizing that I truly am capable of opening up to other people, sharing my thoughts, and connecting on a deeper level. As I have consistently said before, I genuinely and firmly believe that absolutely no one in this world is truly alone, and that support systems are always available. And I really think that I live the life of an ordinary person too, experiencing everyday joys and challenges, that I accept myself fully and completely as I am, embracing all my strengths and vulnerabilities. It's wonderful that now I actually work with children, contributing positively to their development and well-being, and I am also happily in a fulfilling relationship, experiencing companionship and mutual support and so on, with all the other aspects of a normal, happy life.
Zoli, let's talk a little bit more about how it's a very fortunate and truly remarkable thing that Rixie's mother was also incredibly open-minded, that they completely trusted you, because this is indeed a very difficult and challenging thing. The specific way you work, your particular method, not everyone is genuinely willing to take that on. And when we met with Rixie just a few months ago, we talked extensively about how incredibly and profoundly hard this experience was for him, and that it took a tremendous amount of courage. He really had to gather all his inner strength and resolve to make this significant decision for himself, because he had to bravely face certain things he had been diligently protecting himself from, essentially living in a kind of protective bubble. His entire family supported him wholeheartedly in this, saying, okay, for your ultimate peace and personal safety, we'll protect you from the specific things you're genuinely afraid of. But how can we effectively open that kind of crucial door of trust so that people truly dare to come to you? What exactly is it that you comprehensively train? Okay, so just because I'm afraid of snakes, I can say, well, that's just how life is. I don't have to face snakes. I can pretty easily avoid them because there aren't that many around. And it's not exactly an everyday thing to run into a snake. But with what you started dealing with, if you're afraid of every person in the whole world, that's a terrible situation. That's really, really frightening. But still, how can you train for this? Or what exactly do you train?
Actually, Goethe used to have the flooding technique. He panicked about a lot of things, and what he did was let spiders crawl on him to get used to it, and that's how you can train yourself out of it. So basically, you can train yourself out of anything. Any bad reaction can be eliminated, but not with theory. It only works through practice, unfortunately not any other way. And that's what I do. So I created a kind of virtual life simulator, where I basically simulate these conflict situations. It's like a simulator, and I get the person used to the fears they're afraid of, and that's why they eventually let go of them. The theory is very simple, there are no consequences. And we do this in an armchair. Now, obviously people have a hard time facing their own fears, so usually I'm the one who comes across as the unsympathetic person. But the thing is, life keeps sending people my way because I see that the number of autistic people is not decreasing but increasing. So if there were a solution, then these numbers should be going down. But it's rising sharply. According to last year's data in America, the ratio is already 1 in 30. This really foreshadows a lot of things. So the thing is, I wouldn't have wanted to use this method or do it this way or even deal with this at all. But for me too, it turned out that I have no other way out. There isn't. I simply can't solve it. I looked for a specialist when I was depressed about it. They couldn't help me. So that's why this happened. I'm a consequence, and the direction that's emerging seems like it could bring a solution. I'm not saying this is the best, but right now I don't know of anything else. So I don't see any results. On the way here, Rixie and I specifically looked it up. I said, Rixie, can you? Yes. Check online to see if you can find any results. I searched, and he searched too. There is currently no such result in the world, like Rixie's, with this kind of documentation, and now he's even helping the Udists. But this is a huge turning point. However, I don't consider it that big of a deal, so I think it's just a state of readiness. We should maybe downplay autism a bit, because it's actually a kind of family readiness state, and if this passes, then everyone will be normal. So it's not that people are sick here, but rather there's an inner fear that distorts their behavior. That's basically all there is to it. It's just not that easy to get out of it. But that's exactly why I notice with families that what really leads them in the wrong direction is that they consider it a miracle if autism disappears. Now, this is why they don't get out of it. Because it's not a miracle, it's just the starting point. So what parents need to understand is that if they get out of this, that's just a prerequisite. If they get out, that's only the beginning of life. That's still just zero. That's when you start teaching the child, taking care of yourselves, finally living, and so on. This is not the miracle. This is life itself. They are in the negative. So this is what needs to be understood. Now, this is why it's important to downplay the whole thing a bit, to see that it's not such a huge problem, because then the attitude will be better. Because the attitude is that today, for example, I was in Austria, I sorted out a particularly difficult child whom the psychiatrist had given up on. No one knew what to do with him. He trashed the house and so on. So the kid was brutal. Plus he was 17 years old and taller than me and really strong, a real athlete. He could run so fast you couldn't catch him, and of course he would bite the police officers, did things like that. Now, I managed to more or less get this kid in order within a year. And even there, they said that the professionals are simply so afraid of these people that they don't know what to do with them. And the number one thing here is fear. So the professional needs to be fearless, needs to be tough. I'll be honest, when it comes to autistic children, even special education assistants need to develop a certain level of both physical and mental resilience. Because the techniques, I see that today's profession is very good, but only when it comes to training. But the starting point is still missing, so there is a gap there. And you also need to create an environment at that starting point so that someone can properly handle these instinctive disconnected reflexes. If someone gets scared by this, it's bad even for the child. Of course, the child also gets scared that someone else is scared. What does the child see? They don't see themselves.
That's right.
They see what is happening to them much
more sensitively perceive
the
therapist or whoever is helping them or the parents. Yes, that's how autism manifests.
This is also very
big characteristic that they are much more sensitive to everything, and
this is basically a play system, and that's why it's important that when it comes to parents, I always tell them that the number one thing is that there should be synchrony between you, regardless of whether you're divorced or not. By the way, divorce itself is not the main issue, it's more about how it happens. So if there is conflict between the parents, that's the real problem. And if they can at least reach agreements for the sake of the child, they can achieve results much more effectively. Can I give an example of this so that parents can get some information too, okay? I always tell every family to start with an example. Whatever you disagree on, work out a mutual agreement on that. At one of my acquaintances, the little boy was about 4 years old, and I asked them to give an example. He said they did stairs. So what's up with the stairs? They said, well, that's something we don't agree on. I asked, why not? Well, we all want him to go up, but the father holds him by the waist and goes behind him. Well, the child won't learn that way. The mother, on the other hand, just lets him go up. So these are two extreme reactions. So I said, then make a decision about it. And what they came up with was that both of them would stand at the bottom of the stairs and both would chant, you can do it, go ahead. They said the same thing, stood in the same place, and the child climbed up right away so he could do it anytime. So if parents start doing this at home, believe me, they will experience that they can achieve things they never thought possible. Another thing is that everyone overreacts to what they themselves have created. We're currently conducting research that shows there's no such thing as a solitary autistic person. By the way, I don't even like this word. Family panic. So in families where there is an autistic child, one parent is always dominant while the other is more sympathetic, more withdrawn. So one wants to push the child while the other feels sorry for them.
You talked about this at the Taigetosh.
Exactly the same. So this is a trio, at least a trio. There are more people involved, but this triumvirate, it has to come together like this. This is what makes them autistic. And of course, this particular syndrome shows up most clearly and distinctly in young children because they are essentially a genetic mix of the DNA of their two biological parents. So the two distinct traumas meet. It's almost like a kind of nuclear fission, a powerful and impactful reaction. Richie was an integral part of this endeavor too, and it's absolutely certain that his dear mother was also very much needed for its successful completion, and I always make sure to emphasize this point so that all parents everywhere can truly feel encouraged and completely at ease because a profoundly new kind of perspective is absolutely necessary. Cecilia was open-minded. That's very important. So if someone wants to stick to the old methods, they can't expect different results. Even Einstein said that's the reason for stagnation.
Two very important things were mentioned, actually more than two, but one of them is panic. Panic is actually a very useful thing because it shows you how much fear is inside you. But in reality, the cause, what you're afraid of, isn't actually there. So you have the opportunity to solve it again, so to speak, without consequences, of course, if you need someone for this. And the other thing is, as Istvan always used to say, only a healed patient should heal me. How important this is. Yes, you should be the patient. First heal yourself from it or recover somehow, and only then start healing others. Because if you want to heal someone but you haven't been sick yourself, if you haven't experienced it, then you can't be credible in that. You can't be experienced and practiced in it. And of course he immediately sensed that about you, because he is, after all, hypersensitive, overly sensitive. He instantly felt that you were no longer afraid, that you had already gotten through these things. And naturally he could relax into it more. For example, for a mother with her first child, it's always there, that uncertainty, not knowing how to hold the baby. The child feels it like, oh my God, there's total uncertainty. Even the mother is still figuring things out. But by the third or fourth child, that's not the case anymore. You're the first child, right? Do you have any siblings, Rixie?
Yes, I do have a sibling.
What kind of sibling do you have? How old are they?
I have a younger brother who is 17 years old, and I have a younger sister who will turn 13 this year. And
how do they get along with you? Do you get along well, actually? So I guess you weren't afraid of your siblings, right? What was it like with your siblings? Was it good, playful, mischievous childhoods, or what was it like? Tell us a bit more about that. Of course, that's all within the family.
Yes. For example, I vividly remember that with my dear little brother, Marcy. Sometimes we truly got along really, really well, but as young kids, there were definitely times when we fought over a particular toy, for instance. But we never really had any significant problems with each other at all, so there were absolutely no major issues whatsoever, at least as far as I can clearly remember. I didn't have any problems with my sweet little sister, Emma, either, but now she's really, truly becoming a preteen, and actually, it's the two of them who are always at each other's throats, constantly bickering and squabbling.
And you'll truly be the one peacemaker there.
Somehow that's true as well. Yes, that's really how it is, but what I've actually learned is not to get involved in other people's conflicts, because that only brings trouble for myself.
Just like how you always tried to solve your parents' problems and take them entirely on yourself.
Yes, because the real and underlying reason was that I personally took it upon myself. I truly took on that immense pain, even though it wasn't directly because of me, but rather because they simply couldn't agree on certain crucial things, and consequently, they couldn't come to a mutual and satisfactory understanding between themselves.
How would you describe, using a spiritual term, Rixie's vibe? How do you feel about it? Because now, whenever I meet him, he's always sweet, calm, smiling, really very, very kind. I really love how he has this calm, easygoing presence when he's around people. You radiate calmness now. What was he like before? Has there been a change?
In your opinion? Of course, Richie used to beat up his peers. That's why he couldn't go to a regular workplace. That's why he couldn't work, exactly because of these things. Because he wanted to commit suicide, he lashed out. He even lashed out at his own mother, as his mom shared on one of the platforms. So unfortunately, he was aggressive. So right now it almost feels like there's no aggression in this kid. He was full of aggression. That's all he had in him. So the thing is, his vibe is really good now. In fact, he started to feel a sense of mission, because I didn't tell him to go and be this cack person, but now he is. So he feels a kind of responsibility to give back, to pass on what he has gained. By the way, I have to say, and I really agree with this one, that the best trainers come from parents and from the kids who make it out of this. They will actually create the profession of the future, because you can't learn this at university. There's no one who can learn this from a book and then be able to do it. You just can't. Or maybe if there will be a new book, let's say I write the book on autism, then obviously if someone starts to train themselves based on that. But training is essential. Only trained people will be able to handle this, just like we are facing with reactions. And that's the key. So here I couldn't tell him, hey, just be good, what are you afraid of, there's nothing left. He just got even more nervous. It wasn't enough, yes. I didn't understand what he was saying, I didn't get it well, he was breaking his little matchbox cars, and I remember, I wasn't even paying attention, he started talking to his watch. When I'm sitting there across from him, I say, well, Orixie. Obviously he needed to be stimulated, I literally had to provoke him to shake him out of his own world. And you know, at first this is scary for him, but if I keep at it, and on top of that,
in an armchair, I was very persistent.
That's actually the key, that you don't. And it's good that you mentioned this, because I've noticed with parents that one of them snaps too soon and gets nervous yelling at the child, while the other lets go too early, doesn't see it through. Neither of them actually follows through with the task. And that's precisely why children can't effectively learn to consistently complete various tasks, which is in fact the absolutely crucial key to developing true independence in their lives. So as a result, these particular children essentially need to diligently regain their inherent ability to work and accomplish their responsibilities. That is, to be able to be productive, because if things stay like this, just think about it. How do autistic people work today? Well, either alongside someone or not at all. And this is a huge problem, because if the people they work alongside grow old or perhaps leave, what will happen then? But no one really thinks about this, even though the time is getting very close and the numbers are very high now. The ratio is extremely high. So if this ratio tips over, then there will be an economic crash. Autism and its related conditions like Down syndrome, I could list more. ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, all of these, they basically bring the economy to a halt. So there will be a kind of rupture where the whole system will have to be rebuilt from scratch. There are only two ways to handle this. Either we consciously get ahead of it so that it hurts less and we can transition smoothly, or it collapses and then a lot of people will suffer. I would choose the first option, or at least one of them. This is the path we're on with Rixie, and Ritzy has the same mission, to try to pass on this information to as many people as possible. That's how we can reduce the ratio. Maybe.
It's good that there is already someone to whom you can at least pass the baton, and do you really have a saddle? No, and that's why...
I don't, because somehow it was ingrained in my mind that I see my own bad reactions. I don't want conflict with the kids. Do you know why? Do you know when I became like this? Well, I was born with genetics too, it was in me. It's not that I came from a bad parental womb. Please, no one should misunderstand this. But it really intensified when my parents got into a conflict and there was an argument. I remember the scene. I was just a few years old. I had such a fit of rage. So in this, we are the same. I had such a fit of rage when my mom and dad were arguing, and I saw that it was pointless, that there was no real reason for it, that I simply kicked the door at them as a kid at that age and screamed. And something broke inside me there. My grandmother even wrote a poem about it saying I was talented. I don't remember exactly how the poem went, I'll have to look it up. But it was about what nice little qualities I have, but that sometimes, from time to time, there's this kind of explosion in me. I don't even know how she put it, but she was referring to this, that such a burst of emotion comes out of me, just ad hoc. So that just got stuck with me. And yes, I became very impatient in my life, an ADHD reaction, and if something didn't go the way I wanted, I would become a nervous wreck. Really. Did you break things? Smash things? Well, I had all sorts of problems, but I would scream or snap at people So I think people could sense this in me, even though I was otherwise a very dynamic, energetic person, and that's exactly why I was able to create things. That's the upside of ADHD. The downside is that someone with ADHD ends up sabotaging themselves. And for me, this was that typical cyclical crash.
So you achieve great successes, right? And then you end up pulling the rug out from under yourself.
And that's why I don't have children, because I would like to, but maybe now, with what's coming next, because I do see the processes clearly. I'm actually very glad I don't, because here it's just not possible. So basically, right now we're in a period of violence, which is actually a time of cleansing. So then, why am I playing this out again? If I don't reach that level now, and if it's not there, and PAL is needed for it too, right? Somehow even that should have some respect in the head. You also put it out there, that you shut it out of your life so it wouldn't be there. Actually, subconsciously, I pushed these women away. Even if there was a relationship, it always turned out so that it wouldn't last. Of course, women came and went, but it always ended up with some kind of conflict arising. But the child was the key. The conflict happened in advance. Look, it was preventive self-sabotage, so that there wouldn't be a child, because then there would be trouble. Look, I've seen families where one person blackmails the other with the child. That's when everything is over. So I definitely wouldn't do that, and a lot of people wouldn't either. Now I see that the world has gone down so much that it's about to go up. Well, maybe then. But
right now, a lot of people are wanderers of freedom. I think this period is all about freedom, about liberation, about breaking free. When people are deliberately avoiding these very deep bonds, you often use this term too, binding and tying. Well, now the goal is to have as little of that as possible, and I think this period is absolutely about breaking the mold. The old patterns, healing the incurable, breaking free from what seemed inescapable. This is needed. And I think what's happening now is a huge transformation. You can check into this, or you can stay outside and just watch. Really, everyone is free, again, still free for now, to decide how they want to make use of these opportunities in their own lives. I want to warmly and sincerely congratulate both of you, and of course Cecilia as well, because this is clearly a truly remarkable team effort. The significant success and the positive result unequivocally prove that your subconscious mind was deeply satisfied with you, and it graciously let you out of this difficult and challenging cycle, this hard and demanding life. And what's more, it made you even more incredibly useful by enabling you to genuinely help other people in the future, offering valuable assistance and support. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say, Rixie, to those who, besides not being afraid, but as we've seen with Zoli, that's not quite enough now. But maybe if you could also share what was the hardest part for you in this whole therapy, this series of training sessions. What was the most that required a lot of courage and strength from you, perhaps?
The hardest part by far was mostly being able to genuinely connect with other individuals. So like learning how to truly make new friends, to really get to know people on a deeper level, or perhaps even meet some interesting girls.
Are you taking initiative now?
Just like Zoli clearly said, yes, I already do have a girlfriend, well,
But maybe she was the one who came up to you, These days that happens too, that girls pick up guys, as they say. I mean, it's not even...
I know it was actually through a mutual friend of ours. I initially met her through this mutual friend, and our connection truly began when I had the opportunity to visit her at the educational institution where she was diligently pursuing her studies. And then after that, I had the pleasure of walking with her for a considerable period of time, engaging in conversation. So that is precisely how our journey together ultimately began.
I'm glad that's important.
Oduxi used to be so afraid that she wouldn't even go outside because of the dogs, let alone walk someone somewhere. So the change is huge. It's really astonishing, and honestly, sometimes I can't believe it myself.
Well, yes, because a girlfriend entrusts herself to the man, you'll have to protect her, the family, and everything. She didn't become assertive.
So she changed. Well, what I would also mention is that this is a difficult path, and I definitely want to mention Christine Frasina's name here as well, because unfortunately she got so scared by the hardships, since this is a pioneering effort. The truth is, even Galileo got his share, even though today everyone agrees with him. I don't think anyone would argue with Galileo now, but back then he got his share too. Well, we got our share as well, but she put a lot of effort into it. Well, since I had ADHD and she had bipolar depression, our relationship was basically a subconscious meeting of traumas. Well, that's how it is. That's what happened to us. There were lessons to be learned from this too. I mean, I went through a lot and got really low because of these things, but that's exactly why I can see the whole picture today. So, on the one hand, credit goes to her as well, and to everyone else who was involved in this. Basically, that's how it all came together. So, this whole thing became a consequence. And
I guess by now it's become clear to you too how many of our fears are completely unfounded.
Oh.
That's all there is. We can really drive ourselves crazy with fear. We can get so caught up in it, seriously. Yes? Alright, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Rixie, for your courage, for being willing to do this even in front of the cameras. These are very deep, very intimate, and very discreet matters, I think, especially when they reach so far back, across multiple lives, ancient things, even within our DNA. So it really does take a lot of courage, and I'm truly glad for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're grateful for the opportunity as well. And I'd also like to add that there's really no need to be afraid, and that you should dare to open up to others, because no one is alone.
Thank you. We are very grateful to you. And dear viewers, thank you for your kind attention. You have been watching VNTV. You can find our previous episodes at www.vntv.hu.